rise. The Arizona Court of Appeals Division 1 is now in session.
Good morning. You may be seated. Good morning, everyone. I'm gonna try to get the mic right here. Can you really hear us?
Yeah.
All right. Judge Thumma talked about questions that you might have. You will have a lot of questions about this, the facts about this case and about this case. It's a very interesting case. But for the most part, this appeal is different from appeals that you might have seen on TV or know about from TV. A lot of times we do appeals from a jury verdict where the jury has heard all the facts. This is an appeal from a motion to dismiss, which comes about based on a paper record of less than an inch thick. It concerns a house, a rented house in Flagstaff. The complaint alleged that there was damage done to the house by feral cats. That's about all we know about the case. So, I say that so that you will understand why we're not going to ask a lot of the questions that you are dying to know the answers to. Thank you for being here, and thank you to both lawyers for making the trip. We're grateful to you for helping us in this endeavor. So, that being said, we are here today on our case number 1CACV180112, Joel Goldberger et al. Versus State Farm Fire and Casualty Company. As you know, each of you lawyers is allotted a total of 20 minutes for your argument. The appellant may reserve any amount of time you'd like to use in rebuttal. If you do decide to reserve time, now more than ever, you're in charge of keeping track of it by yourself. We have some numbers on the Rolodex there to help you, and you've got your phone, good. When you approach the podium, we'd be grateful to you if you would give us your name and the name of your client, because we are recording the hearing. We've read the briefs, we've studied the record such as it is, and we've also discussed the case in our conference. So with that, you may proceed.
May it please the court and dignitaries in the audience and students and faculty and law enforcement. Years ago, Your Honors, I happened to live for a while in Denmark. And I tried to learn the Danish language. I found it very difficult. People made fun of me. Friends would say, Randy, Danish isn't that hard. In Denmark, even the little children speak Danish. So one of the things I learned about the Danish language is they have very few words. The dictionary would be maybe an inch. Whereas in English, which is spoken by 1 billion people, Danish by 6 million, we have a lot of words. And we've got a very extensive dictionary. I brought one today. And the point of this story is that there are enough words in the English dictionary that State Farm could have written its exclusion with precision, with specificity, and without ambiguity. The fact that they didn't is why we're here today. Now, the language at issue is quite simple. It's 2 words: domestic animals. And the complaint is quite simple. And as you said, Chief Judge, we're dealing with the complaint. The facts have to be accepted. And the facts that the complaint says is that the damage was caused by feral cats. Now, what's a feral cat? We look in the dictionary.
Counsel?
Yes.
Before we get to a dictionary, we would have to find that the term is ambiguous. Assuming that we're looking at secondary sources, I guess I'd like to direct you to the first question that the court sent out. Is the determination of ambiguity a question for a jury? If it's ambiguous, what role does the jury play in determining?
And thank you, Judge. The question is determined by the court as to whether or not the term is ambiguous. And the term that we're looking at is the term domestic animal. My point on telling you the definition of feral, that's not the ambiguous term. Feral is defined in the dictionary as the antonym of domestic. It's defined in the dictionary as animals excuse me. I need my glasses. I'm getting older, I need glasses. So, I'm reading from the Reader's Digest Great Encyclopedic Dictionary, 4th edition. It says feral means not tame, nor domesticated, wild. Second definition, having become wild again after taming or domestication. And then third definition is a wild beast, a savage. The point is that when we say in the complaint that these were feral cats, we're talking about non-domesticated wild cats.
Is the term, the policy uses the term domestic animals,
Yes, ma'am.
not domesticated animals. Is there a difference?
There absolutely is a difference.
How so?
And that is the first point I'd like to make in terms of the ambiguity of the phrase. State Farm could have used the term domesticated, and in fact they define their term domestic animals, animals belonging to a class that has historically been domesticated by man.
Where's that to be found?
That's
Is that an argument? Is that part of State Farm's argument?
yes, it is, and we quoted it in our reply brief on page 4. So, domestic animal. Domestic typically means in the home. Okay, and so we interpret domestic animal to mean pets or livestock. Domestic animals is over pertaining to the home. Domesticated refers to the disposition of an animal, whether it's wild or whether it's been tamed.
Okay. Just to circle back one point, Judge Perkins asked you about ambiguity and who decides those issues. You said the court decides whether a term in an insurance policy is ambiguous. If it's ambiguous, the court determines that it is. Who determines what the meaning is? Is that an issue for the court, or is that an issue ultimately for the jury?
If the court determines that the meaning is ambiguous, then it's strictly construed against the insurer. So if we have a debate where we say we think that domestic animal means house pets, and they say it means any species of animal that's been domesticated in the history of man, then you have to construe it against the insurer, because the insurer had the power to write this policy.
But isn't there a step in between that before we have to consider, along the lines of the employer's mutual case from our Supreme Court, we have to consider the legislative goals, the social policy, and the examination of the transaction of a whole before we would even apply that presumption against State Farm, wouldn't we?
Absolutely, and I'm going to address those, Your Honor. So, there is other language in the policy that one of the questions asks us to discuss. The policy says there's an exclusion for birds, insects, vermin, and rodents, and domestic animals. And we're asked, can we become informed by that language as to what the meaning is of domestic animal. And here's the debate. We say that the 4 categories before domestic animal are all household situations. These are insects in the house, birds in the house, rodents in the house. And so we think that's consistent with saying domestic animals means pets.
So domestic, I think we need to press this with a couple of hypotheticals. Like, are you saying that what about a horse? Is a horse a domestic animal?
Yes, and a horse is an excellent example.
And a horse is not in the home, obviously.
Right, but it's kept near the home, and it's considered, it is, as State Farm would say, of the class of animals that's historically been domesticated. But what then if you have a herd of wild horses that breaks down the fences of a home and causes damage? Is that not covered? Is that something that domestic animal would mean? My point again, using the dictionary, is there's a lot of words, and if State Farm meant to exclude domestic animals, like all cats, all felines, all canines, all equines, in your example, then what they needed to do was to say that we're excluding from coverage damage created by domestic animals, including animals belonging to species that have historically been domesticated by man.
So your point is that we define domestic animals by a particular animal, not by a species of animal.
Yes, Your Honor.
So a tame horse, a trained horse in your backyard that causes some damage, that's a domestic animal. But a wild horse who rambles into your backyard would not be a domestic animal.
We quite agree, Your Honor. Beyond that, it really is important to understand, with respect to the specific animal, who is the owner, who's the keeper of that animal. If I'm the owner of a horse and he's in my pasture and he causes damage, then it wouldn't make sense that the damage could be ascribed to Wells Fargo. It wouldn't be covered under the policy. But
what if he causes damage to your neighbor's yard?
That's right. The neighbor ought to have coverage under his policy.
Even though it's a domesticated horse?
Yes, even though, because it's not his domesticated horse. And so that's another latent ambiguity. Whose animal are we speaking of? And Your Honor, most insurance...
Counsel, wouldn't there be a tort avenue? There would be the opportunity for that neighbor to then sue the owner. At least there would be an avenue for potential reimbursement.
Well, there might, but that doesn't mean that homeowner wouldn't be able typically to have a homeowner's insurance claim as well. And most insurance policies use the term animals that are owned or kept by the homeowner. And that is a phraseology, again, I'm saying they could have used more specific terminology and avoided this ambiguity. If they get done like the other insurance carriers do, and say animals that are owned or kept by the homeowner, then we would know they're referring to pets, they're referring to the horses in the pasture, but they're not referring to the neighbor's bull that gets free and destroys this homeowner's property. So Judge Brown, just to carry that example, let's say that the neighbor has a bull, and let's say that the bull gets out and destroys my home's property. Under State Farm's analysis of domestic animal, that's not covered because a bull is a bovine. It's domestic animal, and that doesn't make any sense, particularly in light of the insects, the rodents. These are all things in the home, and so domestic, the natural meaning is within the home.
So under your view of the case, what would be the factual issues that would be left for the jury to decide in this case?
Well, I think that the jury would have to decide when it goes back down, are these feral cats that created the damage, were they in fact had they become domesticated and were they pets? It's very interesting. That
Well, on that note, how are we to construe your client's allegation in the complaint that the tenant was allowed the feral cats to be in the home?
Yes.
How are we to construe that? It almost suggests that perhaps keeping the animals
Well, it's,
or inviting.
yes, well, it could raise a question of fact, but there's one question that I think gets to this, and that's number 6. It says insurance generally does not cover risks that are easily detected or prevented in the exercise of reasonable diligence. If, as the complaint alleges, the feral cats were allowed access, is that enough to make coverage here contrary to the purpose of the policy? So, I very much challenge the premise. Insurance does cover risks that are easily detected and easily prevented in the exercise of reasonable diligence. This is a no-fault policy. It covers everything except those items specifically excluded. Just like your medical insurance covers any injury you have, no matter whether it's your fault or not. And also your auto insurance is no fault in a first-party sense. So if I take my car and I back into my closed garage, okay, it's still covered. It's covered under my auto policy and it's covered under my homeowner's policy. I think this is kind of the elephant in the room, and it's very interesting to read that the trial court in the oral argument, if you read pages 28 through 30, she's sort of blaming the homeowner on the tenant for allowing the pets in. But here's the thing. There's no allegation that the tenant intentionally was trying to damage the home. Some wild animals were let in. I was talking to my partner from North Dakota, and she says, well, when it's very, very cold, we leave the door ajar to the barn, and we'll find the next morning when we come in, wild animals will be there. It could be a raccoon. One time it was a moose. It doesn't change the character of the animal if it's a wild animal, a feral animal that was let in. Then the fact that they created damage is accidental, and it's covered. And I'll give you an example. I spoke to my father about this last night. He's 96, he's an insurance broker. And I said, well, what about people creating claims based upon their own stupidity? He says, well, that's the whole point of buying homeowners insurance. He gave me an example. He had a customer who was an elderly man who was trying to clean his crystal chandelier. He got up on a ladder, and as he tried to clean it, he realized he didn't want to move his ladder, so he kept turning around the chandelier, kept turning it and cleaning. Finally, he unscrewed his chandelier to the point where it fell to the ground, and he had a $20,000 claim. It was covered, despite his stupidity. So was it stupid for the tenant to let in these wildcats? Absolutely. Was it even negligent? Yes, but there's no exclusion for negligence. And in fact, if you think about it, most home fires are caused by folks throwing a sweater on a space heater or leaving their candles to fall over and catch the drapes on fire. This is what's covered, stupidity.
One more question before you sit down. You suggested to the Superior Court that in the reasonable expectations of a normal person who's buying insurance would support your interpretation, and you proposed, as I understand the record, to do some sort of a survey of everyday people to get their view of that term. Is there any support in the case authority for such a survey to determine the reasonable expectations of a term in a policy?
No, Your Honor. But the reasonable expectations doctrine, that first component of it, which talks about if a court finds something is unambiguous, then they have to assess whether the average person of average intelligence is, it would be within their reasonable expectations. What happens is that in practice, that is an illusory standard, because the courts always say, well, we believe it's unambiguous, and therefore we believe that no reasonable juror would find otherwise. But I would ask this court to consider this matter in terms of an average person and have the humility to recognize that you folks have 7 years of higher education. And the students really are almost in a better position than you to know what the average person might think. Survey evidence has been used extensively in Lanham Act suits and other matters to figure out what people really think. And if you did determine that this was unambiguous in favor of State Farm, I would urge that you let us go to court and try and make an evidentiary showing based upon survey evidence of whether people really understand it the way that perhaps you do. Thank you.
May it please the court, my name is Allison Freeman. I represent State Farm. I'd like to start out by talking about homeowners insurance policies in general, and in this case a renter's policy or a landlord's policy. These policies are written to cover loss that is accidental, that can't be prevented, that you can't prevent with common maintenance. If you have a leak
Where in the policy does it say that?
The policy covers, if you look at the actual language of what it covers accidental physical loss.
But
So
where does it say you need to avoid loss or prevent loss?
Well, it doesn't specifically instruct the homeowner how to maintain their home. The exclusions in the policy are written in there in a way to fulfill not only the purpose of homeowners insurance, but also the public policy that these insurance policies are intended to insure against things that are accidental, unforeseeable, catastrophic, things that the homeowner can't prevent. And the reason that is we don't want to reward those homeowners that are not taking care of their property, that are not cleaning up after their animals. We don't want those homeowners to be the ones that can make claims, receive the benefits of the policy, all to the detriment of the homeowners that actually maintain their property, clean up after their animals, and those kinds of things.
So the policy doesn't say that.
No, Your Honor, it doesn't say that. So let's get down to the exclusion that we're talking about here today. When we're interpreting policy language, the first thing that we do is we look to the ordinary terms. What is the plain and ordinary meaning of this term? So that is step one. And we do look at it not from someone who has a law degree, not from someone who is proficient in business. We're supposed to look at it as the average person would. And so that's step one in this case. And so we look at the term domestic animal. And a domestic animal includes cats and dogs. That is a reasonable interpretation of that term. It's well known. It's common sense.
Is your do you understand the definition to be specific animal based or by species of animal? Are you saying every cat, every dog, or some dogs and some cats?
Your Honor, to answer your question fully, first we look to see are cats domestic animals. That's the question here. And the answer is yes. And it's all cats. All cats are domestic animals.
But you understand that definition would have to apply to other if we're to accept that definition, it would be the definition that we would apply to other situations as well.
Yes and no, Your Honor, because if we're looking just at the phrase domestic animal, we know that the common knowledge is people know that includes cats and dogs. The next question is, do we need to be worried about what the implication of this case would have if we're going to look at other animals that fall within what we know scientifically are domestic animals, those animals that over the years and centuries have been kept by people, can be trained. And that's the second question is, well, is the definition of domestic animal going to include horses? Is it going to include sheep? Is it going to include cows? And the answer to that is yes, and we have case law that supports that. It's not Arizona case law, but it's case law from Oregon and it's case law from Louisiana. And it's the Jugan versus State Farm case. It's from the District Court of Oregon in 2013. It addresses this exact same issue.
Well, tell us, I we've read the Oregon case. I'm not persuaded by the National Geographic website that the Oregon case relied on. Tell me where you get the list of species that you just recited to us. I remember sheep and cattle. How do we know that all sheep are domestic animals?
Your Honor, we know because they are animals that can be tamed by people. They are animals that can be kept on people on farms. And
Is
they
that,
can be
is that
bred.
where you get the definition? How about an elephant?
Your Honor, elephants are not domestic animals.
But they can be tamed.
They can be tamed in a zoo and kept in a zoo in a different situation. But
What
what
about
you're,
a coyote?
right,
I know
a
it's kind of
coyote.
extreme, but people do have them as pets.
A coyote is, right, and a coyote, according to Wikipedia, according to National Geographic, is not a domestic animal. But the point,
If you just pretend, okay, assume that a coyote came in and did the damage here. A coyote that was actually being kept, I mean, it was actually kept in the confines of this homeowner's property. Would that be excluded?
and to answer that question, we have to let's look back and see what does domestic animal include in this policy. And so domestic animal includes, according to the appellant's argument, they want to take domestic animal and they want to add additional terms to this policy and say domestic animals who are kept as pets. They want to change the way the policy is written.
We need a better understanding of what the insurance company's definition of the term is and where you get that definition so we can test it.
Okay, and the way we get there is we're going to follow the steps that the court tells us to follow. Let's look at the purpose of the policy. Let's look at the exclusion itself and the words that surround that exclusion. Let's look at public policy.
I'm sorry for interrupting, but when we asked you this before, you recited a list of species, including sheep, cattle, I think, maybe horses. Where do you get that? How do we know that a sheep and a horse is a domestic animal?
Well, I mean, two ways. If you follow the definition of domestic animal being an animal that can be trained, can be tamed, can be kept as a pet, you just go back to what an average person knows about those terms and the animals they associate with that.
So is that your definition? A species of animal, some of which can be tamed and kept?
Your Honor, domestic animal are those animals that historically have been kept as pets by people and can be tamed. Correct.
So historically have been kept as pets.
Or livestock. I mean, it's not limited to just
Well,
pets.
that's a difference.
Or for food production is what you're saying?
Well, let's talk about how this policy is going to be interpreted by the average person. The average person isn't going to come up to you and say, this is my definition of domestic animal.
If
The
you
average
know what
person
the
is.
average person thinks, then you're opening it up very wide. I'm struggling to find out what the definition that State Farm applies to that term is.
Okay, so to understand that, we have to look at the other things that are excluded. The other things that are excluded are insects, rodents, vermin, birds. These are things that are found around the home, and that is the purpose of the exclusion. Those animals that are found near and around the home are the animals that domestic animal is excluding here. Because those are the animals that the homeowner is aware of, they can take action to prevent harm from, and that's the purpose of that exclusion, to say if you see termite tunnels in or around your house, you then have the obligation to take action to maintain your home, and that's not something that's going to be covered by your homeowner's insurance policy.
So, okay, but you said that's the definition that was in your brief. In other words, an animal that you reasonably find in or around a home. Is that to mean if I can reasonably find a particular animal, that entire species of that animal falls within the exclusion?
Correct, Your Honor.
Okay, so species-based. Now you're telling us it's something you can tame or has been tamed. Does that add it on to your definition?
That is the definition that if you go and you look at Wikipedia and you look at National Geographic, that is the definition that's used.
Is that the definition you want this court to adopt?
Your Honor, I want this court to adopt the definition of domestic animal that includes cats. That is the definition that we're asking the
We
court
are
to
in Court
adopt.
of Appeals. We're going to issue a decision which will establish part of the common law and what this term means. So we need to be keep in mind more than just a feral cat or many of them.
Does your definition, the State Farm's definition, contemplate or would it encompass ownership or keeping of the animal? I mean, would you necessarily say then that a cat has an owner or a keeper?
Your Honor,
A
the
domestic animal.
domestic animal definition does not require ownership or keeping to fall within the exclusion of domestic animal.
So it can be a wild animal that happens to be of the species, and that's your point here. A feral.
That's correct, Your Honor. And that's the intent of the language and the purpose of the domestic animal exclusion is to exclude animals of those species that are found in or around the home.
So why the focus then in oral argument in the Superior Court, which seemed to, I mean, I don't know if you argued that, but it doesn't matter. I mean, there seemed to be a focus that the tenant had invited these cats into the home. What you're saying here, it doesn't matter. That's beside the point because if it's class-based, if you cannot enter or exit the class, I mean, it's static, then that doesn't matter. That's irrelevant.
Your Honor, it is not a required finding to enforce the exclusion in this case. However, if we talk about the definition that the plaintiffs are asking, that the appellants are asking you to adopt. The definition that the appellants are asking you to adopt does relate to the proximity, the location, the tameness, the temperament of these animals. But what is important about using the term pets is the term pets is not defined either. So really what we have here is, State Farm's position is as it was just defined, that we do not have to find that those cats came into the home voluntarily by the homeowner or tenant or otherwise. But if this court does find two reasonable interpretations of domestic animal, and the second reasonable interpretation of domestic animal is an animal like a cat who is in the home, welcomed into the home. If that's the second reasonable interpretation, then both interpretations exclude coverage in our situation.
In your view of the world, is a horse a domestic animal?
Yes, a horse is a domestic animal.
All right. In the questions we sent out, we asked about what about a herd of wild horses? Is damage caused by a herd of wild horses excluded by your policy?
Under the plain and ordinary terms of the policy and the definition of domestic animal, the wild horses that cause damage to property would be excluded. And if we think about that a little bit, those homeowners that live in areas that have wild horses that roam the areas are on notice that those are out there, can take some precautions to protect their property. So it's not inconsistent with that public policy that we want these insurance policies to cover accidental loss of the home, those things that the homeowner can't prevent.
But say what if a bear wanders into a garage and does some damage? Is that covered or not?
It would not be excluded by the exclusion that we're here to talk about today.
Because in your view, a bear is not a domestic animal because it's not found normally in and around a home.
Correct.
Can be tamed.
As far as it can be tamed, I think that that's probably a question for it's the animals we're talking about are traditionally tamed, have been historically tamed, can be tamed as one of those things where we're talking about. Is it possible? Could a bear rip down the front door and cause significant damage to the house? Yes, that's possible. Could a bear be trained to balance a ball on its nose? I don't know, but I understand that it is possible. But those kinds of examples are the ones that shouldn't be used to guide the terms and conditions of the insurance policy. We're talking about the things that we know to be the animals that we know are traditionally domestic or traditionally tamed, and those are the animals that should fall within the exclusion.
So what if I have a child who inexplicably wants a pet skunk, and we find one that's acceptable and bring it into the home, and he does some damage? Is that covered?
Your Honor, if you adopt the definition of domestic animals that State Farm is requesting, that would be an instance where that would not fall within the exclusion. But contrary to what what the appellants have told you, the policy does exclude negligent conduct of the homeowner. And if you're going to bring a wild animal into your home, you certainly have to have an obligation to take precautions about that wild animal, to be responsible, to not act in a negligent manner with the way you're going to care for that animal. So there could be a possibility of
Could you
others.
direct us to the portion of the policy that tells us it does not cover negligent conduct?
It's on page 6 of the policy, and the terminology says, we do not insure under any coverage for any loss which would not have occurred in the absence of one or more of the following, and it includes neglect, meaning neglect of the insured to use all reasonable means to save and preserve property and after the time of a loss, or when property is endangered by a loss.
That's in or after the time of loss, not before.
Well, it's true, but in the time of the loss. I mean, if you've got a skunk that's causing damage to your property, you have to take reasonable action. The first time it happens, maybe it's covered. Oh, I didn't know that skunks would do this. Oh my gosh,
Okay.
well, I'm gonna call my insurance carrier. But if you don't do anything about it and it happens again, your homeowner's insurance policy is not gonna pay to continue to remedy that situation.
Is there any point in this process that the definition of the term is given to a jury rather than the court?
No, Your Honor. The question given to the jury could be, is an elk a domestic animal? We used that example in our papers, assuming an elk was a wild animal, and the appellants informed us that actually people are trying to domesticate elks. So that would be something that could be a jury question. But the question of what is included within domestic animal is a question for the court.
Explain your answer a little bit when you said what is included in the definition. Do you mean what the definition means?
Yes, Your Honor. The interpretation of the policy, yes.
Can we go back to back full circle back to the beginning about the dictionary definition? We start with the policy, according to TUFL, we start with the policy's plain language. But again, I don't think that, at least Judge Johnson and I are not, or I don't think the court is persuaded by reference to National Geographic, with all due respect to the Oregon court. I don't know that that's ever considered a reputable dictionary that we would normally look to if this was a statutory construction case. I don't think we'd go to Wikipedia or to National Geographic. What is the best dictionary definition that State Farm has come up with that defines domestic animal? Or do you have to take the two words separately and combine them together, like in Blacks? Or
the Oregon court did also cite to Webster's, and it states, Webster's defines domestic animals as any of various animals which have been domesticated by man, so as to live and breed in a tame condition.
Okay, let's go back to what's the difference between domestic and domesticated, and does that have any significance here in this case?
Your Honor, I don't believe that has any significance in this case.
You're saying that it's the same.
Domesticated, domestic animals, we've been over. Domesticated could refer to the specific individual animal. This is a domesticated, this one right here.
Wouldn't that be is a feral cat domesticated?
Is it? Yes.
How?
Because it's a cat. Because it's within the cat family, and cats are domestic animals. If you're asking,
domestic animals, but is it domesticated?
Your Honor, there are, even in the definition that the appellant read about feral, he read 3 different definitions of the same term that all said different things. We could go through 10 different definitions of domestic and domesticated that are all going to use different terminology and say things a little bit differently.
Does that make it ambiguous?
It does not.
Yes,
We've been cited case law to that effect in our briefing. That just because you can, think about the things you can Google online now, the different opinions you can find about people about what terminology uses. And let's talk about, okay, what else could State Farm do to communicate that domestic animals are excluded? If we were going to list almost every domestic animal. Do you see how big that dictionary is? We're going to talk about a policy that is as thick as could be. What State Farm did is they put the best word they could think of to explain to their homeowners that domestic animals, cats, dogs, are not excluded are not going to be covered by the policy. Horses, things like that, things that are in and around your home.
Well, I would suggest that one ambiguity is it's not clear whether domestic animals as in the policy means a specific animal or a species of animal.
And Your Honor, if that's the conclusion that this appellate panel makes, there's still no coverage here because these cats were welcomed into the home.
We don't know if they were welcome. The complaint says the tenant, as I remember, allowed them access.
Correct.
That doesn't mean welcome
Well,
necessarily. A jury might find that.
okay, then the tenant allowed them in. They allowed them into the house, and that is going to keep them within that definition of domesticated. They were in that home. There is other definitions of domestic that say, are you living out in the wild, or do you depend on people? Like I said, there's a lot of definitions out there. But in this instance, even if you look at these specific cats, they were still allowed into the house, and allowed into the house, as the complaint alleges, to cause $75,000 worth of damage while inside the house.
So, just before you close, your definition that you'd like us to adopt is a domestic animal is a species of animal that is normally allowed or found, which one? Found in or around a home?
Your Honor, I'm not asking this court to define domestic animals in all circumstances as it's written in the
Well, we
policy.
need to do that for our opinion, so tell us what
All
you
of this
propose.
court needs to do is conclude that cat, whether feral, domestic, or otherwise, falls within the definition of domestic animal, because that's the common understanding of that term.
I need to know though, how do you define domestic animal? Is it's a species that is what?
Historically tamed by humans and is found in or around a home.
Both of those.
Well, historically tamed by humans is the definition of domestic animal. What we know from reading the rest of the policy language is that's the intent of the policy. But all of the definition that would need to would be domestic animals are animals that have been traditionally tamed by people.
All right. Thank you.
Your Honors, the evident problem of having an ambiguous policy like this is that it enables State Farm to come in before this court in Arizona and say domestic animals means species of animals. That's the way we interpret it. But then when they have a homeowner in Florida who's got a pet python, they say domestic animals, that means pets. And the homeowner can't tell how they're handling different policies with different instances from state to state to state. We have very little information as consumers. And that's why this court needs to make a determination that protects homeowners from the ambiguity of the policy.
But why can't we resolve this narrow question before us, as counsel suggested? Why do we need to try to tackle a problem that might be in 49 other states?
Well, Your Honor, there are at least two definitions of domestic animal that have been propounded here. One is State Farm, saying that it's species of animals that have historically been domesticated, and our interpretation that it's pets. Okay? Now, no one can say that a wild animal that is allowed to take shelter in a garage is a pet, is a house pet. And the definition of feral is very clear that the definition is, this is the antonym of domesticated. It's not domesticated, it is wild. And so to try and shoehorn a cat that is, the only information we have is they're feral. It's the only information. They're not domesticated. You can't shoehorn that into a domestic animal exception.
Isn't the problem that the homeowners here view the exclusion as being specific animal-based, that one, and State Farm views it as being class-based, or I guess scientific, species-based?
Yes, Your Honor. That is a primary ambiguity. And another ambiguity is the very definition of domestic. And we provided a definition, Judge Brown, you asked for a definition. We gave the Cambridge Dictionary that said a domestic animal is a pet or an animal raised for meat or fur. So there are different definitions. And we talked about wild horses. I just want to add one more species, which is the pigs. Because in Texas, I understand that feral hogs number in the millions and cause a great deal of damage. I presume that State Farm and their homeowners policies in Texas is saying no. They're saying feral hogs are excluded. But I maintain that probably when people have exotic pets, they say no, domestic animal means pets. And that's the problem with the ambiguity in this case. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Thank you to both of the lawyers for your briefing and for your argument, and as I said before, for coming up here to be with us today. We'll take the matter under advisement, and we will issue a decision in due course. Now we will adjourn.